I read today that 4 men have been stabbed in London over a 5-day period so far. And the last one was a man who was killed in broad daylight. I mean, this is a really brutal situation. You know, nobody would have thought the 21st century London would have violence on this scale, but as we know, it's part and parcel of living in a big city. There's an article here in RT that says, London's knife crime numbers continue to soar as 4 men were stabbed in a 5-day frenzy of violence. The latest victim of London's violent crime epidemic died last night, stabbed in broad daylight in North London. The man, understood to be in his 20s, was stabbed in Islington on Monday. Emergency crews, by the way, Islington being Jeremy Corbyn's neck of the woods. Emergency crews were called to the scene at Upper Street, but the stabbed victim died at the scene, Scotland Yard confirmed. So there was 3 other men that were stabbed, aged 20, 24 and 28. These are young lads. And the murder toll, as it says here, is more than 65. Now, there is a common theme here. It tends to be young people. But most of all, the victims tend to be young black boys. And it's quite obvious why. This is a gang problem. And it's interesting, there's a story here in the Daily Star. London gangs using stabbing point system to boast about attacks as bloodbath continues. So the source is obvious here. I mean, it's quite obvious based on the victims and based on where it's happening. This is postcode wars, it's gang violence. And it's interesting, this article here. London gangs are using a point system to boast about the number of people they have stabbed in the ongoing turf war. Now, this is coming from a guy called Chris Preddy, who was awarded an OBE in 2012 for his youth work. And he revealed the motivation behind youngsters stabbing each other. And in the article, he said, there's actually a point system that the young people are following. If you stab someone, you get a point. If you're in a gang and stab 2 people and somebody stabs nobody, then there's peer pressure to go out there and get yourself on the score sheet. Chris was told about the system by a 16-year-old boy who said he was at the top of the table after stabbing 6 people, and he doesn't even know if he's killed them or not. A 16-year-old boy going out stabbing people. I mean, it goes hand in hand with the acid attack violence. It tends to be gang violence. This is not just warfare, but a point system, almost a game. And this is what happens in London, where poverty exists. You know, what happens when you increase migration so high that people struggle to get jobs? What happens when you allow properties to be bought up by millionaires from all over the world who never even come to the city? And these properties are left empty. Well, it drives prices up artificially. You know, London's got 9 million people in it. 9 million people, and there's about 65 million in the whole country. 9 million. And not only that, the house prices are extortionate. Immigration is changing towns beyond belief. There's nothing for young people in London. And what are they turning to? Well, they're living in poverty. The parents are working all day, but they can't even afford to raise their kids well. So what's happening? They're going out and stabbing each other. And there are solutions to this. I mean, you can start with actually solving the problems at the beginning, solving the source problems, reduce immigration, prioritize police resources, basic things like that. They can't even get those basics right. But the police are doing something. But there's an article here that says police gang strategy targets people unlikely to commit violence. Isn't this just so typical of the public sector in the UK? Is this not just typical of the police? This article in The Guardian says the Metropolitan Police strategy to tackle gangs appears to have caught up a significant number of individuals who, according to secret police assessments, do not pose a danger of committing violence. Well, very well done to them. They're catching people, but they're catching the wrong people. Now, I mean, this is a really interesting article. According to an assessment seen by The Guardian, more than 40% of young people on a list from Haringey in North London are scored as posing 0 risk of causing harm. Some are assessed as being much more likely to be victims than offenders. The data also shows the majority of those registered on the matrix are young black men. So we've got obvious truths, obvious solutions, and the police aren't doing it right. The police aren't solving the problem. I mean, it's not all down to the police, but the police could do one thing that would stop this. And that's random stop and search. Not targeted stop and search that Sadiq Khan talks about, which is basically just normal policing. We need random stop and search in London. Now that's going to help in the short term, but in the long term, we need to solve this problem by Well, creating a city that's worth living in, giving people a reason to live, a reason to get up in the morning. When people go to work all day for buttons, because the economy is so screwed, not because the wage is so low, but because costs are so high. When people live like that, of course they're going to be driven to violence. Of course they're going to end up living in poverty, and kids are going to have nothing to do, going to have nothing to live for. There's two things we do. We need to start stop and search, and the politicians need to start creating cities and towns in this country that are actually worth living in. If you like that and want to see more, remember to like and subscribe and download the new Rebel app from the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store.